Welcome to the Irish NFL show in association with QuinBet as we recap the week 3 action. And good evening to all of you watching our live stream on our social channels. Our handle is at IRE NFL show. You can also catch up with us on our website, irishnflshow.com. If you're listening back to the podcast, welcome to you also. At time of recording, we're a couple of hours away from that seismic Monday night football showdown between the Lions and the Ravens. And we'll have instant reaction to that coming up on Tuesday morning. We have considered reaction now, though, on all the rest of the week 3 action, where the Bills, Colts, Chargers, Eagles, Bucks and Niners all emerged with their perfect records intact. The Falcons fell off their perch in a big way against the Panthers, of course. The Broncos lost on a last-second field goal for the second week in a row. We start, though, with the team which won on a last-second field goal for the other team that blocked kick 6 for the Eagles as they completed a comeback from 3 scores down to overcome the Rams. We managed to watch it all in the Tap House in Ranelagh, incidentally, where there was a watch party for the Steelers. Shout out to Tom McCormick and all the Steelers crew there. They got their win. They broke the curse of the watch party. We've been watching the curse of the watch party here on the Irish NFL show for a long time. You want your team to win on the weekend. Usually the worst thing to do is to arrange a watch party. The Steelers have broken that streak, though. Couldn't have come at any better time as they roll into Dublin next week for that very first regular season NFL game on Irish soil against the Vikings, who also won, and we'll get to both of those games. But thanks again to the crew at the Tap House, to Kieran, to Dave, to Andre, to Dara, to Adam, and to all the crew who looked after us. Hopefully I'm not missing out any names there. We were particularly happy for Kieran O'Reilly, who's done so much for us and has been such a great partner for us here from the Tap House. And Red Zone Tap House, very much his creation, something we are very happy to co-create with him. And we're delighted for his Eagles that we're going to talk about now, that they won, even if we gave him plenty slagging along the night. And he rubbed it in our faces, I can tell you, when they won on that blocked kick 6 with the big man rumble. Who doesn't love to see a 300-pound man running at 18 miles per hour, as long as you're not between him and the donuts? Right. The Rams, Brian, showed that the Eagles are far from invincible, but they won. They did what they needed to do. One of the things we were saying last week is there is no weaknesses in this team, and that doesn't mean they can't be got at, but they find so many different ways to get you.
Yeah, you started by saying we were delighted for him. Where were we? I don't think I was. Anyway, not judging by the video that was circulating late last night of me walking off of that field goal.
Look, you hid your joy well. You hid your joy well.
All in jest. It's a weird one because I read a piece today where they said the Rams have the Eagles' number. They had the Eagles' number in the playoff game. They had their number last night, and yet still haven't found a way to navigate victory in either of those games.
Well, Brian, you've set me up now with the perfect opportunity to mention Mayo against Dublin and all those All-Ireland finals. Like, Mayo were better than the Dubs several times, but they didn't come out with the win in the end. It's no good having a team's number. The only number that counts is the one on the scoreboard.
Yeah, you're right. You're on the ball. Like, as much as they played really well against them last night and in the playoff game, you got to find a way to get these victories. These victories are huge at this time of year, even when you put in a playoff situation in terms of seeding and all the rest. Watching that game last night, Kieran O'Reilly kind of commented on that the Eagles hadn't been playing overly well over the course of the first few weeks of the season, so it didn't come as a surprise that the Rams were getting at them, and it looked quite dominant. But interesting enough, and again, Kieran called it a half-time, and looking back at the stats of the first half compared to the second half, he said they're going to have to come out slinging in the second half. This is not a Saquon Barkley-led second half performance. This is going to be Jalen Hurts feet, Jalen Hurts throwing, AJ Brown finally getting his opportunity to get involved in the game over the course of the season, because we've seen not necessarily disgruntlement, but he's been frustrated by the lack of passes coming his way. But certainly in the second half, he stepped up, Smith stepped up, and yet the Rams still found a way to put themselves in a position to win, which is a compliment to them that they didn't. Other teams would have just fell short and felt it wasn't their day, but they still achieved the opportunity to win the game. Having missed one, I was convinced that wouldn't repeat. The trick wouldn't be repeated, and they'd find a way to get that one over. But sensational block. It reminded me a bit of last year's game, and I know the Chiefs didn't go on to win the Super Bowl, but I was in Germany watching the Broncos-Chiefs game last year. It looked like the Broncos had that one sewn up in Arrowhead, and the Chiefs found a way to block that field goal. And we talked about good teams find ways to win games no matter what the circumstances are. And right now, you'd argue they're not just a good team; they're the best team in the league. And yet again, they've got over the line. For anybody who was with QuinBet on that 3.5-point line last night, Connor, they would have been rumbling all the way to the end zone themselves, because it's such a game changer. That 3.5 line spread was covered in the end, and I know a few people that were on it. So, look, exciting game, and it was one of the better games over the course of the weekend, despite the fact we had so many exciting storylines.
Kieran O'Donovan, one point that Brian raised there that I wanted to pick up is that the Eagles had to sling it a little bit. And, suddenly you find, AJ Brown hasn't gone anywhere. It's a little bit like they forgot about Dre, but they didn't, because they know where he is when they need him.
Yeah, last week we talked about it. Chris Jones got into it with Jalen Hurts, and Jalen Hurts was, because of his lack of yards, he had something like 100 yards last week, and Jalen Hurts was like, we won the game. Shut up. It's inconsequential. But last night was different. Came to halftime. What was it? There was a 19-point deficit, and they had no choice but to go to Jalen Hurts, and. He answered the call. He was awesome last night. Him and AJ Brown. I thought AJ Brown, the physicality, he looked like a guy who was just a foot taller and a foot wider than everybody else around him. It was like there was times where AJ Brown reminded me of, have any of you played Jonah Lomu rugby back in the day? No.
Yes,
when Jonah Lomu got the ball on the wing and he just went like that and just stiff armed. Like, how many moments did AJ Brown have like that? Where just sheer brute strength just got him out of a jam. And I think it was Rich Eisen used the word today, inevitable. And early on in the second half, when they were still multiple scores down, even we were saying it on the WhatsApp group, we were saying this is an Eagles win. It's inevitable. And even though the Rams had the drive to win it at the end, you just felt it in your bones that this is what the Chiefs have been doing all along when they've been winning. Nobody has felt easy, no matter what the lead was. And myself and Kieran talked about it on the instant reaction last night. We said this is a psychological blow now for the Rams. It's the second time that there's no such thing as a moral victory here. Yeah, you can play this team close, but you play them close twice and lose, then that's muscle memory, and that's muscle memory that you don't want. You get on the field for, this could be an NFC championship game or a divisional round or one of these important games later on in the year, and you've got that lingering memory now if you're the Rams, who, credit to them, they went all out and they took over the game after a pretty ominous start. There was a Zach Bond interception to open up. The Eagles went down, tush push, and I was kind of saying,
quite possibly offside, tough.
Yeah. That's a debate for another day. How long this tush push is going to go unchallenged again this season? I don't know, but there was an ominous start where I thought, oh my God, the Rams are going to get blown out here. And then they just took over the game. They took over the game and they dared Jalen Hurts to throw the ball. They kept Saquon under 50 yards, I think, for the whole game rushing. And he just proved, we have this throwing game, we have this passing game, we can pull it out whenever we want. And I credit AJ Brown and Devontae Smith, because there would be receivers in this league tearing their hair out of their head. Yeah. They'd be, if this was George Pickens, what would he be kicking over on the sideline?
How much of a difference, though, Kieran, must it make that you've got a ring on your finger already? And this is, I was chatting to, again, shout out to Kieran O'Reilly. I was chatting to him and I was saying, and he was saying, I'm not necessarily the biggest fan of Sirianni. I said, right, whatever about how Sirianni appears, like maybe he's more chairman than CEO, but whatever he's doing, it's working, because he's got to keep that combustible mix together, which he does. He's got to replace coordinators when they get picked off by other teams, which has happened now several times with Kellen Moore, with Shane Steichen, with Jonathan Gannon. And above all, and you see the way they do this, and it's in what you said about Jalen Hurts and the way that he leads. Jalen Hurts isn't going through a game chirping. Like, he's not Mr. Trash Talk, and he's not, showing off in people's faces or celebrating. And the Eagles kind of frustrate people because, for all their talent, they're incredibly risk averse. But that's actually not the correct way to describe it. They understand risk reward better than any other team in the league. Why would they be pushing the ball downfield when they can move it down slowly, when they can gash you, when they can slice and dice you, and they don't need to be heaving the ball 20 yards and throwing it up there, because they know that when they have to, when the risk reward is in the other direction, they can, as you say. And AJ Brown is going to compete for it in the air, and he's going to outmuscle you. That they feel like they've got a guy who's, we said it before, they've got a guy who's better than your guy. And when it comes down to it, that gives them awesome confidence. And why should they be rolling the dice all the time? Because they just don't need to.
Yeah, it's just they're champions. And Jalen Hurts, as I saw another statistic that was put up on one of the talk shows today, and he's up there in terms of win percentage in games where he's thrown for over 30 times. He's up there in the company with Brady, Montana, Manning. Like, he's in, he's top 5 quarterback in that regard. So it's, it's like what Al Davis used to say, just win, baby. That's all that matters,
Yeah. Shane, on that point, and we shouldn't overlook the Rams and the contribution they made to this game. And as Kieran said, and I think it's a really important point as we look ahead to, even at this early stage, to what seems an inevitable, to use that word again, playoff rematch that we're going to see. They brought a lot to the table here, and beating a team for 2.5 quarters is no good. You need to finish up, as Brian was saying, on the right side of the scoreboard. But they will feel like they did let this one again slip through their fingers, and they do have the way to beat the Eagles, but they got to get it done.
Well, they showed their original pathway of beating the Eagles in the start by making sure that they stopped the run. We saw how much that the Eagles aired the ball out in the second half because they managed to keep Saquon Barkley as quiet as they really could have, as they did.
A Saquon that's run up like fucking 300 yards against them or 400 yards in 2 meetings last season. He was ridiculous against them, and they had to do that.
Exactly. So it was quite clearly something that they targeted. It's classic Rams that, if they have something in mind and they target it, they achieve it. But the thing is, obviously, the Eagles, when the question was asked to them, and we were saying in the preview that this is probably the toughest question the Eagles have been asked so far this year. When a question was asked them, they adapted. My problem now with the Rams, the fact that there was a couple of times we were watching yesterday and Stafford was standing and he was holding his back. You could tell that still isn't 100% right. And if that was right, what second half could we have seen from the Rams yesterday? I'll be interested to know.
Shane, that was a triggering comment for the men on the podcast in our 40s here. Like, all I do is stand around holding my back.
Our late 30s as well.
All ahead of me, I suppose. But just like in fairness to Stafford, I mean, you saw in the second half he became less aggressive with his throws, less accurate, less wasn't able to move in the pocket as quickly. As well as I think part of that was the fact that the Eagles defense managed to shut down his pocket a little bit quicker. But that I think for me that is a potential difference if these guys do meet up in the playoffs, as is very well could be the case that the Rams, if Matt Stafford is given a bit more time to become more fit and ready from that back injury, which to be fair, like we were talking a few weeks ago, we weren't even sure whether Stafford would be ready in time for this game. So the fact he was starting that season doesn't mean that he's 100% fit, and they were still able to come out with these sensational performances in the first half. So it wouldn't necessarily be, frustrated at the way they collapsed. But the big takeaway from here is just the fact that the Eagles are incredibly dangerous and scary, and this is the reason why they're the best team in the league. We remember a year ago that when the Eagles played against a very similar game like this against Cincinnati, they came out victors, but there was question marks over Jalen Hurts' leadership. Sirianni was in the press being like, everywhere Jalen Hurts has been, he's a winner. And we were all like, no, that's nonsense. A year ago, we were questioning whether Sirianni was
we were still saying that, Shane, when they wobbled badly against the Panthers, and the Panthers nearly beat them down the stretch. Like, we were questioning the Eagles all the way through a season that finished with such a flourish.
And that's the thing, like Sirianni now, as you mentioned there, I think there is definitely a big part of this Eagles team now that because they have the ring on their finger, that there's confidence. They don't need to prove themselves to the world anymore. They only need to prove themselves to each other and to what they know they're capable of. And that's the difference now that we saw this time last year, that, sometimes when teams win a Super Bowl, there's a sort of, okay, we've reached the top of the mountain now, and there's a bit of a downslope afterwards. We kind of saw it with the Rams a couple of years ago, kind of. The Eagles aren't like that at all. They've won a Super Bowl, and they know they have more in them, and that's what makes them incredibly dangerous. I was really impressed by the way that they changed their tactics so well in the second half. There's such a high return from Jalen Hurts being able to air it out at key moments as well. I mean, being able to read the kind of situations to make sure you pick the right pass over the middle, not trying to force it, not trying to go too deep, but just make sure that you get the job done. And all credit to the Eagles for doing it.
Brian, before we move on to Colts Titans, one more point you wanted to make.
Yeah, I guess we're focusing very much on that playoff game, and obviously last night being the most recent game. Let's not forget they actually played each other in SoFi around week 6, week 7 on Sunday Night Football last year, and the manner of that game was very similar. The Rams started hot, they looked like they were well in it, and then Saquon Barkley went off and had a mad game. I'm sure the frustration is there now. That's 3 in a row, so maybe we will see that rematch. It
is scary, as you say it, that if you quote Bill Belichick and make me beat you with your plan B, the Eagles can beat you with their plan B, and they proved that last night. Well, we move on to Colts Titans, where for the Indianapolis Colts, Brian, plan A is let Daniel cook, and Indiana Jones is whipping it up a storm out there in Indy.
He is, but we spoke about it last week, and their defense seems to have improved as well significantly over the course of the first few weeks. And it's kind of telling that the first score of the game was a pick six on a rookie quarterback. It was like as if the inevitability of let's go after a rookie quarterback early, let's put him under pressure. Let's find a way to put our offense in a good spot here, that the pressure isn't on them to put the scores up. But there's a chemistry there right now with Daniel Jones and Jonathan Taylor. And I recall very early on in particular that season when the Giants went to the playoffs. I mean, Brian Table's first year, that could be his last year, but it looks of it now. But they had a really good understanding, and it really helped Daniel Jones to kind of play at a level that year where he had a confidence sport of a running back who was on top of his game. And it looks like Jonathan Taylor really bounced back. I mean, he had a really, really good game yesterday.
Yeah. I remember, I think it was on one of the first shows I were on, we were talking about Daniel Jones and what the future held for him. And that was the season after, obviously, that playoff run, playoff one and done. Sorry, it wasn't a playoff one and done. I do apologize. They won their first playoff game, then they beat the Vikings that year, and then they lost the next one. They were well handled by the Eagles, wasn't it?
That's correct. Yeah.
But I remember saying, like, what do you want? Like, the guy goes to a playoff game, and in the biggest game of his career, he had the best game of his career. Like, he does have something.
I never doubted he had it. Just the pressure of being a quarterback in New York is very different, and it's evident by his play. It's like a breath of fresh air. But we have seen these rehabilitation programs over the course of the last 3 or 4 years. Baker Mayfield is in there. We've seen other quarterbacks. You could even argue Sam Darnold, Carson Wentz yesterday. You could argue is back in that program. He's in a good spot. But what is striking is kind of
being in a good spot for one more week, because we're going to see him in Dublin. By the looks
yeah. Well, it looks like he's going to be in a good spot for a couple of weeks now. Beyond Dublin, we're going to see him in London as well. My God, 2 weeks of Carson Wentz. It's going to be rocking and rolling over the next few weeks. The one thing what I'm finding very, I wouldn't say puzzling, but Daniel Jones was put in a conservative role over the last couple of years with the Giants because he just didn't trust him to make those big plays. And yet here he is now making striking plays. Not only in terms of going down the field after their wide receivers, and Shane might have called it out in their preseason stuff. Like, people sleep on the Colts in terms of their wide receiver room. They've got some really good players there. Pittman in particular is a really good wide receiver, and he's making plays with his legs. It's all going very well. But I think we're going to see next Sunday, which some of the Rams, how did the Rams rebound because they have the Colts at home next Sunday. That's a fascinating game for the 9 o'clock window next Sunday.
Kieran, I know you've got the house bet on Mike McDaniel being the first coach of the year to lose his job, and I think that money is still safe. I don't think that it will be Brian Callahan, but it was interesting. I saw a clip over the weekend of Callahan coming out onto the pitch at the start of the game for the warm-ups, and as soon as the fans saw him, they started booing. Patience is running out for him, and that might not be fair, but there's a reason why they say NFL stands for not for long.
Yeah, and it's hard to be hopeful for this team at the moment. They're clearly one of the weakest teams in the league, and it's a pity because Cam Ward looks like he's obviously not the reason. He's and he looks like the real deal, but it's just a case of whether you can trust the organization now over the next couple of years to do the right thing and put the right bodies around him. We keep saying that over and over again, but it's so important because, like, I look at an extreme situation here with Joe Burrow, who we can get onto, and we get onto the Cincinnati Bengals in a while, but the Cincinnati Bengals are now in a position where if they don't do something to keep the ball rolling or to put something around Joe Burrow and protect his future, he's going to be the next Carson Palmer, and he's going to be out the gap. And you don't want a talent like Cam Ward sitting in Tennessee, for years and years and turning into this, forgotten quarterback that was just, he'd be labeled as a bust. Because I think there's a lack of sensitivity from people who follow the NFL, who just tend to go straight for the quarterback. If a team can't perform, and a guy came in as a number one pick, it's just his fault, and that's it. It's the buck stops at him. But there's so much more that goes into it. It's the offensive line, it's the weapons that they have, it's the running game to complement it, it's the defense to give them the short field, or to get them the field to play on. So I just hope for Cam Ward's sake that Tennessee can go about this construction job over the next couple of years. And look, maybe Brian Callahan deserves a little bit of time, and continuity is what Cam Ward needs. But patience will run thin, and the fans will have a lot to say as the year goes on if it keeps getting worse.
Shane, Steelers Patriots was obviously the watch party game in the Tap House last night. I'm sorry it didn't go the way of you guys, but at least we did manage to start the Tap House winning streak, with the Steelers in attendance, as Tom and the Steelers crew saw their Pittsburgh Steelers win the day. It wasn't a bad night out for the Patriots, though. I mean, I don't know how you're feeling, but looking at them, I thought they're moving in the right direction.
Yeah, I'll touch on the Patriots briefly because I do think that Steelers were the better performers on the day. But there was a sense in this match that neither team wanted to win it. We even was chatting to the guys, obviously me going around my Patriots jersey, they were like, did any of us want to win this game? Because that's just the way it was going. I mean, the Patriots did give away 5 turnovers. And the Steelers just never really punished. Now, one of those was in the end zone. But from the Patriots' point of view, I think the things that you coach, the thing that you work on in practice, they're improving. Our offensive line is playing better, but the penalties still aren't disciplined enough. The offense is looking smoother, but ball security is what killed us yesterday. It wasn't Drake May's quarterback play. It wasn't how well the offensive line was trying to protect. The run game got nice gaps. The passes were complete when Drake May was slinging it. It was simply ball security. And the fact is you can't coach that. You can't buy that. That you either players individually have that or they don't. And Ramondre Stevenson is somebody who has a very bad track record of that, as he mentions himself after the game yesterday. So I think from that point of view, the Patriots could probably feel a bit better. Plus the defense did showed themselves to be much better tacklers and much more tough than they were against Miami 2 weeks ago. But to me, the big thing here is the fact that the Steelers defense looks a bit more confident and is starting to look like the Steelers defense that we know. The previous 2 weeks, and it's particularly shocking against the Seahawks 2 weeks ago, is how feeble they looked, how many gaps there were. TJ Watt wasn't necessarily getting on the play. Yesterday, TJ Watt had a really nice turnover, was making some strong tackles. Really made Drake May work.
Also, and for the defensive player of the year, like there was one particular play I was watching him where Drake May escaped the pocket. TJ Watt looked like he had him in his sights and he just couldn't get there. I'm like, okay, Drake May is a mobile quarterback, but he is not Jalen Hurts. He's not Patrick Mahomes. He's not that fast. I would expect, like, just look to me like TJ Watt is even a half a step or a quarter step slower than he should be, and it's affecting him.
Yeah, I do think he's slower, but yesterday, unlike the first couple of games, I think I don't know whether it's schematically or just how strong he's going into the tackle, or even just the use of his body when he is in there. I think he's starting to become a bit more effective. And I don't know what, again, as players develop their career, we talk about in GA how sometimes a half forward does less running but more kicking. Whether there's a similar kind of thing to how TJ Watt has to now be using that Pittsburgh defense, and Pittsburgh are taking a bit of time to try and figure that out. And that's why we didn't see much from the first couple of weeks. But the problem for me is, again, well, you're coming up against a Minnesota Vikings team in Dublin this week that put up 48 points on Cincinnati. You're looking at what the Steelers have done. They weren't particularly strong last week. They got a grand total of 203 yards in total offense this week. I mean, considering all of the turnovers, the Steelers should have absolutely nailed the Patriots to the cross if Aaron Rodgers was playing the way that we know Aaron Rodgers can play, the way he played week 1 against the Jets. But it just looks so pedestrian. It was like Matt Canada was back in charge again. And I'm hoping we see more flashy stuff from the Steelers this time around. But I fear that we're walking into a more turgid matchup, like we've seen the last couple of times we've been to Croke Park watching Steelers games on the screen. That time, of course, because that's the only way that they will keep it close if this offense is running as it is. Because particularly in the run game, Jalen Warren 18 carries for 40, something like 40 yards. Not a great return on that at all. And again, this Patriots defense wasn't exactly, you're not exactly facing a top 10 defense in the league. Let's put it that way. We have to remember, like last year, the Vikings picked off Aaron Rodgers 3 times. They're going to be gunning for him again. I'd be quite worried about that if I was a Steelers fan coming into this week.
All right, we'll take a quick break.
Great odds. You're in control. You always bet responsibly. And you're not afraid to choose alternatives. That's why you bet with QuinnBet. Build your own unique football bets with Create a Bet. Winning team, first goal scorer, number of goals, the possibilities are endless. And with a 4-star Trustpilot customer service rating, why not give QuinnBet a shot? QuinnBet, we bet you love it.
Brian, it was a battle of the backup quarterbacks when the Vikings took on the Bengals, but it wasn't even close. Jake Browning had no say in the day's affair, really. It was Carson Wentz and the Vikings' day.
Yeah, and it was the Vikings defense day as well. Kind of two touchdowns returned. We haven't seen many of them over the course of the season. I know we're only a couple of weeks in, but we went to this game and we were wondering which quarterback would you rely on most in a backup situation. I felt Jake Browning would go in and have a good account of himself. That's why I selected the Bengals. I expected a high-scoring game. It was a high-scoring game, but it was a very one-sided high-scoring game. I thought he would find a way to get the guys. We were talking last week about Addison being suspended, Jefferson having a kind of a quieter start to the season, and I felt in particular, and I know a few others picked the Bengals, that Chase and Higgins would find a way to get into this game, and Browning is comfortable enough. He's been in this offense a few years now, but he was all at sea yesterday. It was evident from very early on. He was under pressure. The Bengals offensive line with Shane rightly called out. I know you've alluded to Connor. Sometimes it doesn't matter what quarterback is back there if that offensive line is not going to do the job properly. And the front seven, and the Vikings front seven that we know, and that they can get after any quarterback. It was dominating, and for Kevin O'Connell, I think it would have been a huge relief to come off a slow start to the season. Let's be fair. Like, I know they got out, as you rightly called it, for 3 quarters in Soldier Field on Monday Night Football. They didn't do much. They didn't do very much against the Falcons on Sunday Night Football. Maybe getting out prime time was a help, but getting yourself in the 1 p.m. window, less strain of eyes on the team, less pressure. It's a significant win. Bearing in mind the Steelers have won, we're probably in for a much better game than people would have thought next Sunday. But it's a striking one for the Vikings, because they go out and put a performance on a Bengals team which everyone thinks will be whether it's Burrow or another quarterback. A lot of people feel this team will still run the Ravens close in that division. That was a striking performance for me.
Kieran, you touched on the Bengals earlier and the hurt locker that they're in now. I mean, you can look at the standings and fool yourself. They're actually on top of the AFC North, but that's not going to last.
No, it's not. And like, look, this was 48-10 yesterday, but it was over at halftime. It was 34-3 at halftime. And at that point, I mean, even before then, it's game over, because you can't rely on Brown in the run game. That's gone out the window. And then you're looking at a quarterback looking for 2 receivers when the opposition can just shut it down. I mean, they ran out of options very quick. And that was because of those sloppy turnovers. Just a shout out to, I mentioned last night, this week in Dublin is going to be the battle of A-Rod versus I-Rod, because Isaiah Rodgers had statistically the greatest game a defensive player can possibly have. According to PFF, he was the one who had 2 first half touchdowns, the first Vikings defender in history to have two defensive touchdowns in the same game. He had an 87-yard pick and a 60-plus yard fumble return, and I think he forced another fumble. But yeah, look, as I mentioned,
please tell me that you've trademarked that, just the way the Kieran Boyle is trying to trademark Jets of the South, the Jots. A-Rod versus
A-Rod versus I-Rod.
We need to make that happen.
Yeah, but look, yeah, I think I feel strongly after last night that, and I actually I applied the exact same logic as Brian when I went and picked the Bengals. I thought Browning, he performed decently when he came on last week.
He is the serviceable backup straight from central passing, isn't he? You normally can rely on him in those situations.
Yeah, and it was a case of almost like mirrored situations where, look, the Bengals have their 2 guys at wide receiver, and the Vikings are missing one, so that I give the slight edge to the Bengals. But after last week, I think if the Bengals aren't out shopping now and doing some serious work in trying to sign either Jameis Winston or Kirk Cousins, trying to get somebody into the building that can give them some hope. And as I said, it's all about trying to get, like, I mean, they have T. Higgins locked down now, they have Jamar Chase locked down, but I don't know if I'm Joe Burrow sitting there. I'm really, really looking at myself, kind of saying, what am I doing with my career? Staying here in Cincinnati, like, I'm going to let this potential Hall of Fame career just float out the door, because it was the offensive line last night. Again, it was the same. I think I saw some clip, someone saying that Joe Burrow at this point, he can nearly take a case against the Bengals and win, because they've done so little to protect him physically. And it was last night, even in Joe Burrow's absence, it had all the signs of it. So no, it's really, really frustrating as a sneaky Bengals fan, as Shane keeps calling me. But yeah,
you're manifesting.
It seems like a waste. Yeah,
Shane, a quick point. Sorry, Kieran, to cut you off.
No, work away.
I was just going to say, Shane, a quick point from you on this game. I know you had something to say before we move to Panthers Falcons.
Yeah, I think that the Bengals really need to think about it as sort of changing their quarterback, because Jake Browning has thrown 5 interceptions in 6 quarters this season. Now, you could talk about how much help does he get from his O-line, and I know I was saying last week about, well, any quarterback there would struggle in that situation, but if you're trying to be prove to the world that you're serious, you need to try and find a way of making moves and pressing that panic button now, because that 2-1 lead is going to completely vanish in the AFC North by the time Joe Burrow comes back in December. So I wouldn't be surprised if they start making moves to Kirk Cousins, who, as I'm sure we'll get on to now in a minute, took a few snaps when Atlanta lost to Carolina.
Yeah, indeed, Shane. And let's talk about the team we should talk about first, which is the Panthers, who laid the wood on the Falcons in a major way. And as a fan of a shit team, I do like it when the shit teams occasionally do get one over. We thought it was all Falcons in this one, and we were wrong.
Very much so. And what surprised me about this is, as I was watching back through it, it never really felt, you look at the scoreline and say, oh, 30-0, the Panthers completely blew out the Falcons. It never really felt like they had actual control of the game. And the fact is they didn't, but they won the moments. And I think that's what Bryce Young has proven himself to be capable of doing. I'm actually raging because when I was doing up the graphics for the picks, I was looking at this one being like, everyone's going for the Falcons. Well, I go for the Panthers. I've been backing the Panthers so much. So no, I won't. That's just a stupid decision, even if it is one of those divisional games that anything can happen. What I like about Bryce Young, though, is actually if you give him more high percentage plays, he delivers better. I think sometimes during the early part of the year, link back to some of the confidence he had going deep last year to like Adam Thielen, that they were trying to find someone that more deep passes. Now, he wasn't necessarily giving the ball away, but the balls were flying, were going nowhere, and he was very struggling to get anything out of that. This time, I think they were very much trying to sort of hit those passes 8 yards before the line of scrimmage. You saw they got a nice bit of room out of that. Ted McMillan and Tommy Tremble getting some nice room every now and again. Ted McMillan, I think, averaging 16 yards a catch, which is pretty nice going for somebody who's building in to his young career. So fair play to the Panthers for killing it, but this is a game that the Falcons really should have won. You look at the fact that they had an extra 120 net yards, had better yards per play, completed 40% of their third downs, which is all right going compared to the fact that the Panthers only completed about half of that percentage. You look at some other statistics as well. I mean, 332 total yards, 200 passing yards. But the problem is Penix, who we thought was going to be this fantastic player, who we've seen flash out and get a big win and really against the Vikings last week. Again, a game which was close, but ended up pulling away in the last quarter. Just made some absolutely ridiculous decisions. The intercepted pass that he gave.
Terrible throw. Like, what were you seeing there?
It was awful, genuinely awful. And I wouldn't mind it. That was the game. Because at that point, it was the second half had started. Fair enough. Carolina are 10-0 up. Neither team will really take control of the game. Both defenses had a good grip in it. This is your time to, at least, if you're not going to push the ball forward, then don't do anything stupid. And there's a couple of times as well where he had clean passes to go, but he scrambled to the right-hand side, scrambled to the left, not getting enough yards. I think there was a 3rd and 12. There was a couple of clear routes he could have gone in the middle, but he chose to run it and could only get 6 yards out of it. I think there's some really poor decision-making from Michael Penix, which has to be looked into here. The second interception later on in the game, which was particularly sloppy. But that one to Joe Smith-Wade, when you're 11 yards away from your own end zone, a very, very clear one to the left. We've seen that so many times from quarterbacks who end up getting dumped from their teams very soon after throwing plays like that. And I hope for Penix's sake that he doesn't repeat the trick. But yeah, it's just really bad form from him in particular.
Brian, on the Falcons, we were singing their praises last week, saying Bijan Robinson looks like the most exciting offensive player in the league. They really seem to have a good thing going. Defensively, finally, they have a pass rush. 2 rookies on the defensive front particularly stepped up. The defensive back they took in the 4th round comes up with a pick.
Yeah,
it's all gone a week later. They don't score any points, and they get emptied out by the Panthers.
Yeah, we're only a week on since we were praising them, Connor, about the impact of all these rookies very early on in the season, and it's a bit of relief because there's been a lot of mismanagement of selections over the course of the last few years, and who saw that coming yesterday? We spoke about the Panthers' second half performance in Arizona last week, and I factored it down to the Cards easing off the gas, and I think that was kind of the general consensus there. But maybe it wasn't. Maybe it was a turning moment in their season, albeit very early, that they were able to kind of come back, be in a position to win the game, and they took it on into this game. It was so dominant, so one-sided. It's a huge blow for the Falcons, and maybe the Panthers aren't going to struggle as much as we thought they would. And in a division where the Saints don't look like they're going to do much, the Bucs are 3-0, but maybe they can squeak in there and challenge the Falcons for second place and try to put something together and try to be in the back end of the December with meaningful games and try to make the playoffs. Bryce Young, for me, is still question mark, isn't he, Connor? Like, we just don't know. And when you're that far into a career and we still don't know, kind of, you do know. Isn't that
Well,
what you say?
exactly. I remember we were talking about Justin Fields in this context a couple of years
Yeah,
ago, and
true,
I was
very
squinting
true.
and wish casting, and you said exactly the same thing, and it's true. If you don't know by now, then the answer is no.
Yeah. And
Kieran, you wanted to make a quick point on clock management. Hopefully not my clock management.
No, it was just a contrast. We were so full of praise for the Chiefs a couple of weeks ago, and the precision that the way that they managed the clock to get a last second field goal just at halftime. Like you saw a stark contrast to that at the end of the first half of the Falcons. Well, they were still completely in the mix for this game, and I was feeling like, okay, they've had a bad start, but they're going to come back into this, because like that, I was the same as you last week, full of praise for the Falcons, but they blew two timeouts. They went up the field. They had less than 10 seconds left. Michael Penix, he threw a ball up the middle to Darnell Mooney. Not a prayer he was going to get to the sideline. It just ended the half. He would have been better off throwing the ball out over the sideline. And it showed a complete lack of awareness, a complete immaturity. And while I was trying to defend Penix last week, he was absolutely woeful last night. He looked terrible in every aspect of the ball in terms of his playing ability and his game management, clock management. And it was just something that stood out for me last night.
Okay, we're going to move to Bucks Jets. And I will say, first of all, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers won this game. But for me, there was only one winner. We don't like moral victories on the NFL show, no more than any sports fan likes the moral victory team. But yesterday, for all who celebrate, was Earth, Wind and Fire Day, because it was the 21st night of September. Jenna Lane on ESPN set this magnificent clip of Aaron Glenn dancing down the sideline as his man went in for a pick six to the right song at the right moment on the right day, and it is a joy. Sick dance moves. Aaron Glenn, take a bow. The Jets had to jet, and they had to ruin that special moment, of course, by doing what they always do and losing the freaking game. And my heart goes out to them because, and let me throw in another gratuitous Napoleon Dynamite reference here just to keep continuity. That man has canned heat in his heels. It's amazing. Love it. How can you not love that? How can that not make you happy? What a great game.
So can I jump in first on this one? Mike Francesa, through former New York White Fan Sports Radio, said this morning, what was he doing? What an idiot! He should be coaching and not dancing. And the minute he started dancing, we knew they were going to do what they always do and do Jets things and lose that game. I mean, it was for the moment in itself. It was yes.
In fairness, that's exactly what we said. We saw it last night. It was like, he's dancing. Just 2 minutes left in this. The Bucs are going to win this game. Come on. So
it looked like they were gone completely. It looked like it was going to be a 9-point lead. We're talking about QuinnBet. Sorry, jumping about with the QuinnBet piece, Connor. But like, there were so many people last night who were texting me, burned by so many situations, including the Packers. But the line in that game was 6.5 points for the Bucs with QuinnBet, and a lot of people thought that field goal was going to go over, give them the 9-point lead, and essentially close it out. So things quickly changed. But yeah, it was a fantastic piece. But for the Jets, yet again, unfortunate circumstances. Sorry, Shane.
No, I'm just singing the song in my head. But I'm just 2 points that comes to my head. And that one, the podcast.
Yeah, it's like the most unfortunate line. Never was a cloudy day. All there bloody is cloudy days for Jets fans.
Just two things. Firstly, all the podcast listeners who were like, "What in the name of Jesus are they playing the music for?" Please look up the video of the head coach's name, dancing.
Aaron Glenn. You owe it to yourself. You have to look it up. Sorry, as you say, apologies to people who got the sound but not the picture. But you need to go and check that out. Now pause this, go and watch that, and come back with a smile on your face.
It's so good. I have never seen you guys, but when I was still in summer camp in Air, we made choreography to that tune. I should show you some night. Not quite as good as Aaron Glenn's on the sideline.
One time at band camp.
He reminds me of, do you remember the Trebor Softmints, Mr. Soft ad a few years and years ago? This guy walking up the street, the way he was able to contort his body, it was unbelievable.
Over my head. The only thing on this actual game I will say, it was unusual to see Tyrod Taylor actually playing quite well in that system once the Jets kicked in there. I think both the Jets and the Buccaneers had 100% red zone scoring efficiency. There aren't too many teams in the league, including the other guys from New York, who could say that coming out at the end of this week.
Well, I'm going to say on that point, Kieran and Donovan, like, it does go back to this what you've been saying about Tanner Engstrand, the former Lions passing game coordinator who came across there as OC and got the promotion at the Jets, came along with Aaron Glenn from the Lions. They see something in him. We saw Justin Fields look a lot more competent and poised in the pocket earlier this season. he does seem to have something, and he's got them scoring points. They're not winning games, but it's early in that project to be writing them off.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, how many times have we talked about people putting people in the right places? Not every coach has to take the next leap. And obviously there is something to this coach, because he was hyped in New York. In the off season, there was a lot of hope for Justin Fields improving in that passing game, and you saw it again last night. But I have to admit, lads, I saw very little of this game, because this was the game that Red Zone forgot. This was a game. This was game over. We didn't see this feature for a long time. And next thing, the scoreboard flashed. I was looking at and listening to Scott Hansen kind of say, "Oh, by the way, this game is still in the mix," because I had written this one off. It was unbelievable. But my big takeaway from this game, and we've spoken about him a lot on this show, is the rookie Emeka Egbuka again, and for different reasons this week. Early on in the game, there was an example of pure heads up gutsy play from him. There was a ball came out. He saved Baker Mayfield's blushes. Ball came out, and he absolutely threw his body on the line to get the ball out of play and to stop a turnover that would have given the Jets a short field as well. So there was that. And then when the game was on the line, when Baker had to go and drive down, to get the go ahead field goal, he was looking for Egbuka, and Egbuka came up with a big catch on that play. So he's a rookie with a really, really good head in his shoulders, and he's a guy that's obviously a huge part of what's going well for the Bucs. And while Baker Mayfield has been 2-0 in the last 3-4 seasons, he's never made it to 3-0. So like this, things are looking up. And I think I don't think I was high enough on the Bucs. Actually, I give them huge credit. And we talk about a team that would have the mentality to take on the Eagles. I think the Bucs are the team that are one team that could really stick their chest out and go toe to toe with them.
The hipsters Super Bowl pick this year. A lot of people think that this could be the year for Tampa Bay, that they have that DNA. They're not that far removed from lifting the Lombardi. Todd Bowles knows what he's doing. Baker is having this unbelievable run, and they will have to do it for a little bit by the looks of it without Mike Evans, who's tweaked his hamstring yet again. Unfortunately, that's an annual issue for Mike Evans. Brian, you wanted to talk about the Coach Glenn presser after the game.
Yeah, like he said after the game that he's taken back by his negativity around Jets and this constant reminder of same old Jets. He actually said, tongue in cheek, I don't even know what that actually means. I've been so far removed from this organization for quite some time. But he acknowledged that the players played really well in week one, non-existent last week, 23-6 down. Kieran's asked him why the game wasn't on red zone for a long time, because it was 23-6 and looked like it was going nowhere. Yeah. And they came back and nearly won the game. And he said after the game, these players are playing for each other, despite what people outside want to think or may think. Like. Yeah. And you teed it up nicely there, Kieran, because the Bucs are playing the Eagles this weekend as it happens. There you go, 6:00 on Sunday. It's a nice game. It'll be interesting to see if the Bucs are in that position to go 4-0 and take down the Eagles. I think it's a big asset.
I'm going to say I'm making an exception this evening for those of you watching rather than listening. I'm wearing my Bears jersey. I'm normally a big proponent of no cheering in the press box, but as I was saying before we started recording, two things happened this weekend. The Bears finally won a game and looked like the hiring of Ben Johnson might actually be the right move. And we'll get to the Packers shortly, Kieran, don't worry. The Packers lost. So this actually might end up being the peak of the season. So I'm leaning into it this one time in week 3. It might never get any better than this. It peaked in week 6 last year. Maybe it's been week 3 this year, but I'm going to enjoy this one for all it's worth, because Bears beat the Cowboys 31-14. We'll see how good the Cowboys are as the season begins to unfold, because their defense certainly looks like one of the easiest to own in the whole NFL. And a game that we thought was a get-right game for the Cowboys turned out to be a get-right game for the Bears, who came back after that humbling against the Lions the previous week. Probably the most significant thing I saw was that, and most people watching saw, was that flea flicker play, that classic Ben Johnson razzle-dazzle and fake out where DeAndre Swift takes a handoff, runs up to the line of scrimmage, turns around, and I had a horrible moment where, he flicks the ball back way too high. First of all, last season, that ball goes over Caleb Williams' head. A defender picks it up and rumbles the whole way, the other way down the field for a fumble recovery and a touchdown against the Bears. But this year, Caleb Williams catches the ball over his head, fires it downfield, a beautiful throw to Luther Burden. Even Tom Brady agreed that it was a beautiful throw, and they get the touchdown. And I have never, in a long time, not say never, but not in a long time, see the Bears do something like that. See the Bears play offensive football, look like they actually could score enough points to just demoralize and take down an opponent that, while nowhere near their best, is feisty. We also saw the Bears D step up, a little bit bend but don't break. They ended up conceding quite a lot of red zone opportunities, but stood strong, picked off 2 Dak Prescott passes in the end zone, and generally did a reasonably good job of getting the Cowboys off the field. One swallow does not make a summer, as we all know, but Shane, I saw the Bears do things that I haven't seen them do in a long time. And one thing that I take away from this game from the Cowboy side, though, is we've seen their defense once again cannot stop giving up explosive plays. This seems to now be the theme of the Cowboy season, that whatever about missing Micah Parsons in the pass rush, it's the back end where they just can't get anything done, which is kind of surprising, because one of the things that Matt Eberflus has made a trademark of in his career is defensive back coaching, and they just keep getting burned and burned and burned. We've seen it over and over again. Teams can take the top off this Cowboys defense, as the Giants managed to do over and over again last week, and just take them to the house.
Yeah, it's a good thing you mentioned about the Eberflus thing. I was just thinking, if this is the sort of Matt Eberflus revenge game, but to what extent did Caleb Williams and those Bears offensive players just know the weaknesses in the Eberflus system, and the similar kind of weaknesses that we saw play out the previous week against the Giants? And once the ball is in the air, there's no communication, no coordination. You're not quite sure whose responsibility is to pick up which receiver. It's just not gelling right. And I don't know whether that's the case. It needs to build time, or something wrong with the Cowboys defense. Either Micah Parsons has gone, or there isn't necessarily a leader to bind it all together. What is that distraction around Micah Parsons done with the Eagles in that dressing room, which we know could be kind of hard to manage. Well, Brian Schottenheimer as well, a first-time head coach. We just don't know his credentials in actually organizing and controlling his players, because this Cowboys defense looks increasingly mismanaged, increasingly, I guess, struggle increasingly to try and put an identity on themselves and take control of this. I'm not taking anything away from the Bears. One thing I must say from what I have seen of Caleb Williams' play is we were criticizing him last week for just forcing it too much and making a lot of stupid decisions against the Lions. His selection of passing seems to be a lot more, that slight bit more conservative, but in a way that actually, you got the job done. It wasn't, you stood off the cliff of being absolutely stupid and just went for, 15 yards, whatever it was that he managed to pick off a couple of times. He did, after all, score 4 touchdowns. So I think he needs to build momentum off this. He needs to try and gain confidence in his wide receivers and in the game planning. But for the Cowboys' point of view, I'm really, really worried about that defense in particular and its ability to take control of what they should be taking control of, because Dak Prescott will have days when he throws 2 interceptions. That's fine. That happens. The Cowboys, as they have done previously, when that happens, need to rely on their defense to try and keep things at least close. And they haven't been able to do that this year. Against the Eagles, I don't know to what extent that was really just the Eagles being slightly slower for the start of their year and what ended up being a close game. But they got completely ripped against the Giants defensively. Dak Prescott had to go reach into his bag of clubs and win that game. And the Bears, in fairness, didn't allow them the chance to do that.
Kieran, we move on to Browns-Packers, where the Packers certainly have no issues on the defensive side of the ball themselves and look to have one of the better, if not the best unit right now in the NFL. But it's the offense where we really saw them struggle against the Browns. And it's kind of hard to figure out why. I mean, let's firstly credit where credit is due for Cleveland, who have the best run-stopping defense in the NFL, came off an absolute shellacking against the Ravens the previous week, were clearly hurt and had something to prove. But with just under 4 minutes to go in this game, while it was a frustrating ride up to that point for Green Bay, you still didn't think the result was in doubt. The Browns had yet to score, and then it all went south.
Yeah, and you put it well yourself there. I don't think the Packers have the best defense in the league. I think we saw the best defense in the league last night, but it was on the other side of the pitch. It was the Browns. They were, start off there, they were incredible. They had the Packers running for their lives all night last night. The pressure that was being put up, and not just by Myles Garrett, it was his supporting class. Garrett just leading the line. He looks like a guy who's just impossible to block. And this was one of those games. I put it to you this way: the Packers last night needed to be the Munster rugby team from the glory days in the early 2000s. They needed to play the percentages, kick it down the field whenever they needed to do it, because as you said, 10-0 actually it felt last night like a 3-score game. because the Browns, it never felt like the Browns were going to get anything going from, with a long field. So, there's a lot of criticism coming from Packers Nation now about the offensive line and how they couldn't block and everything like that. I'd caveat that a small bit with and give the Browns defense the credit that it's due. And fair enough, there's some injuries on the Packers offensive line, but this to me comes down, and I'm not going to be too hard on him, but Jordan Love needs to learn a lesson. Yeah. Like when you're in a game like that, you're 7 points up. The Browns can't get anything going. They don't look like they're capable of scoring a touchdown. You do not throw that interception that he threw. I mean, he threw a dump off pass to absolutely nobody. Like he wasn't like, there's no way he could have been looking there, before he let the ball go. If there was even a doubt that there wasn't a receiver in the area, he needed to take a couple of yards of a loss, kick the ball down the field, and have that awareness, that game situation awareness that our defense can win us this game. We've scored enough points. One touchdown is enough here tonight. And he needs to learn that lesson.
It stands in stark contrast, Kieran, sorry to interrupt you, but it stands in stark contrast to the points you were making very eloquently earlier on about Jalen Hurts and the Eagles, against whom ultimately the Packers will have to measure themselves, as every team in the NFC and indeed the NFL will have to measure themselves. There's no path to the Super Bowl by the looks of it that doesn't run through Philadelphia at some point. What you get from Jalen Hurts, as you say, is reliability. It might not always be fireworks, but he's not going to throw a back-breaking pick at just the wrong time, and he's not going to make it all about him or try and do something that he doesn't need to do. Because in Jalen Hurts' mind, as you said it earlier, as long as they win, it doesn't matter if it's 10-3 or 10-0 or whether it's 42-5. He just wants to get it done.
Yeah, and our guest for Saturday night, I'm looking forward to meeting him, Brian McFadden. He had there was a great video of him in a college locker room a few weeks ago. What was his alma mater?
FSU.
FSU. So he was in the FSU locker room after the game, and he said that after a great win, he reminded the players that this is like perfume. Perfume is lovely. It smells great, and there's perfume all around, but you can't taste it because it's poison, So I think this was a real comeback down to earth game for the Packers. That everybody's been all about them the last couple of weeks, saying, "Oh, they're the big challengers for the Eagles." And listen, you're going to have games like last night. There's, you're not. I don't think anyone ever believed that the Packers were going to go 17-0 or anything like that. But last night showed that the defense is really, really dominant, and the defense looks like it could carry them a long way. But the offense isn't quite there. And Jordan Love has shown. I think he's shown growth in the last couple of years. I've a lot of faith in him. I think he's going in the right direction. But if he doesn't learn a lesson from last night, he'll never learn one. I think it was as clear could be where the game turned last night, and it falls on him, unfortunately. But he's got to learn from that, and he's got to know you kick the ball down the field. You don't have to score. You don't have to score 20 points to win every game.
Brian, final word on the Browns, who won that game. There are ways to win in the NFL, as we've been saying. That was, kind of an ugly victory in some ways, but it won't feel like that in Cleveland. They were absolutely celebrating raucously after the final whistle. You could tell that it meant something to them and that they proved that they're not out of the fight. Yeah,
absolutely. A couple of weeks back, Connor, when we were doing our AFC North preview, you asked me, how can this team establish victories over the course of the season? How can they be competitive? And we touched on their defense, and we talked about Graham being a player that, because of the trade with the Jags moving up, that he was I wouldn't say he was lost in the limelight, but he was a huge player. Kieran Boyle raves about him. He's had a good start. Myles Garrett is Myles Garrett. But Malik Collins was a player that was missing for them over the course of last year because he had a serious injury in camp. Never played once. I think he played one snap last year. And we said if he could come back and play at a level complemented by Myles Garrett, they will be in position to win games. They will play really well. Like, let's be fair. Like, they should have won the first game against the Bengals. They missed a field goal. They missed an extra point. Last week, I think they're on a hiding to nothing, with all due respect, because of the nature of the Ravens lost the first week. But they still held Derrick Henry to less than 30 yards rushing last weekend. So the defense is holding up. It's ultimately whether Joe Flacco can get the job done over the course of the season. There's doubts over that, but that's a huge one to turn that one around. It's significant. It reminded me a couple of years ago, Conor, I think we were on our way back to London. From London, when the 49ers lost to the Browns and the 49ers missed a late field goal to win the game. I had that feel about it. It was always going to come down to that nip-or-tuck type of play, and they came out the right side of it, but it didn't look like that was the case. It was a huge victory for the Browns, and Browns do Browns things. We just assumed they'd missed that field goal. It wasn't to be yesterday. It was a nice day in Ohio.
All right, well, that puts week 3 almost in the books. We still await the outcome from Lions Ravens. What a game that's going to be. Enjoy it, everybody who's staying up late to watch that. And make sure you listen in to our instant reaction show, which will be available wherever you get your podcasts from Tuesday morning on.